Hi guys, you're welcome to another episode of Android Programming. We'll be talking about content provider. Content provider manage access to a central repository of data in Android. Content provider works like any relational database, whereby you have tables. You can have more than one tables, and you have multiple columns and rows. Content provider provides data to other aspects of the Android development, where we talk about the abstract threaded sync adapter, the data storage, the cursor loader that provides data to the UI, which runs asynchronously right there in the background thread. When we talk about the widget, content provider provides data to the widget and also helps out in the search algorithm of your application. You can read data from other content provider, and you can also create your own data content provider which can be accessible to other application. We're going to be creating our first content provider in this tutorial, whereby we're going to be working on a boilerplate code which already have a database set up for us, and we'll be building on top of this source, whereby we'll be creating the first content provider, and as well we'll be calling data from the content provider down to the UI. So join me on in this tutorial. You're going to learn a lot, and please don't go anywhere. So let's head straight to Android Studio, where we'll be moving ahead in this application. So let's start coding. Right then in Android Studio, we have the source code which we'll be building the content provider on. You can get that from the GitHub, which is actually the JSON Safe to SQLite, which we actually talked about creating, DB helper and consuming a JSON object right there and save it into your database. If you're not familiar with this, you can actually check out my video on storing JSON data to an SQLite database in Android. You'll be able to understand fully how to actually go about the DB helper, whereby we actually read JSON data from the raw JSON file, and whereby we save each of those values into an SQLite database. So we go about that right there in the DB helper, and you can find that explicitly in the video, storing JSON data to an SQLite database in Android. Let's move to the major focus for this tutorial. We're talking about building upon we already have a stored database, and we want to build upon it. We want to create a content provider right on top, which is actually going to be the repository to access. It's going to actually enable us to access our data from the storage repository. Right there in the DB contract, we have our DB contract where we declared the columns that we'll be using and the table name. We need to add more functionality to the contract. We need to create a content authority. This is just anybody that has this authority can access these content provider, or can use this content provider to query the DB. So we declare the content authority, whereby majorly you basically use the reverse domain, or let's say the package name of your application, which comes to come the example.library.json to SQLite. So that's our content authority. You also need the base content URI. These are all static final strings declared. The base content URI is from the URI class, whereby we pass the content. You must create a sort of a link to your content authority. So that's just what that depicts. The content, the 2// and we concatenate with the content authority, which is the com.example.delaware.json to SQLite. So that forms our base content URI. Very important. And we declare the path entries. We need a path to the table, whereby we declare the path with a string static field called entries. So you have to have a path to the particular table you are trying to access. The menu entry that implements the base columns still stays. We included two other static final string. The first is the content type, which content type are you looking at. We have different content type. We have for the full, probably you're accessing all the data right there in your database, or you are trying to access just one data, which will definitely have an ID, or you are trying to update one data, update it with the help of the ID assigned to that particular row. And if you are accessing all of these data, you call them. So that's why we decided to split this kind of content type into two. We have the content type for all entries, and we have the content item type. That's for a specific row right there in the database. So the first content type, if you should notice, the cursor that directs the base type calls on the entries, and the item type call on just one entry. So that says it all. We have the content URI, whereby we call the base content URI. Look at the way we build it up. We'll build upon this, and we append the path as the path to the table, to the path entries, which was created, which is called just entries, and we build this up. We're going to be needing the content URI when you're calling the cursor loader, when you are trying to call data from the content provider down to probably to the widget or down to the UI. You're going to need the content URI. So we still have other aspects still maintained: the table name, the columns that we'll be using, the name, description, the price, the category, and the photo. Cool. That's fine. So from here, we have a robust DB contract that actually houses the content authority, the base content URI, the path entries to your table, and we also have two different content type. The first is for the all entries, and the other one is the content item type. So we're able to build up our content URI, from the base content URI and also from the path entries. So I hope you understand how this flow. Cool. From here, we'll be heading straight to the menu provider. This is the intent. This is the provider, which extends the content provider. Look up over there. It extends the content provider. And we also need a DB helper. We call on the class, and we created an object from it, because there we're going to be needing the writable database into, because we already have a DB helper that have access to the database directly, so we need to call these as well. We create our first string field called authority, whereby we need the content authority. If you notice, we call the content authority right from the contract. Now we create, we have entries though. We have two entries. The first is just all entries, and the second is the entry with ID. If you notice, we are trying to be specific on what we access from the database. The first entries, we give it just one integer value. The second is the one with ID. We give it a 2. Cool. We need to build up the URI matcher. What about we instantiate with the new URI matcher, and we add the URI, which is the authority now, which is just the content authority based on the entries, and the root entries. And we have the other one, which is the entries / there should be an identifier from the old data, and in the old data you need just one specific entry to either modify, to update, modify, or to delete. That's just what the other aspects. So that's what we call the root to the entries ID. Cool. And now create, we need to instantiate the DB helper, so it's going to be usable. Fine. And we actually need to implement some methods once you create your first content provider. The first is the query over here, whereby you can easily query the DB. You're querying the DB from the content provider. The second is the get type. Which type are you talking about? Is it the entries, or is it the entries with ID? Cool. And the third is the insert. This is just like the normal CRUD: the create, the read, the update, and the delete. Now you are inserting to the database based on, probably it's at the random level or it's at ID level. That's why we still need the case of the root. We're still going to go through that in the Chiefy. And we have the delete, whereby you want to delete a particular row or you want to delete all rows from the database. You can also update, you want to make changes probably to your row in the database. That's cool. So that's what we have right there. So I'll be going through them quickly in a jiffy. The first is the query. We're querying the database. We're trying to select functionality from the database. Let's look at the parameters that we must pass. We have the URI, cool. The URI, very important, which is going to be like probably the content authority and the base URI, cool. And we have the projection. Projection is the columns that we are dealing with. How many columns are we accessing? And the columns that we are actually looking at. That's what the projection is. You can see it's an array. And we have the selection. Select from where? Which column are you selecting from? Which column are you accessing? And the selection argument. What is the base of your argument from the column you are trying to select on? That's what that selection argument is. And your sort order. Once you've done all that, how are you going to return the value? Are you sorting order based on the ID? Are you sorting it based on the name? Or are you going to sort it? You can sort it based on ascending or descending order. And how you feel like sort order is very important. So if you notice, most times when you're creating the database, we usually add null, or up to 4 nulls. You wonder why are all these nulls? Fine. It's because number one, probably you're not selecting from anywhere, and your argument, you're not giving any argument, and your sort order, you just want it to be the default. That's why you had null. But once you have values here, you need to tidy it up appropriately. Cool. Now let's look at the way we instantiate the DB helper called created an object. We now have a writable, a readable database now on the DB. We also have the builder from the selection builder. Without much without going further, we need to look at the selection builder. The selection builder is just like a boilerplate that actually gives you access to different different selection queries, that can be used on your DB. So let's look at the selection builder. We have more than one of the method snippets right there. We have the map, which is the map string that calls on the projection map over here. We have the selection from the string builder, and we have from the arguments that we used. So this is the constructor, whereby we set the table to null, we set the selection to the length, whereby we're passing 0, which is the first array, and we have to actually clear that out. Cool. These are all boilerplate. I will implore you to just make sure you have a chunk of this right there in your selection builder class. Whereby we have the selection builder. From where are you selecting from? This is just like a shortcut when the class is empty, you return this value. And we have from the table that you'll be selecting from, the selection builder table. We have the assert table, so it actually throws a new illegal state exception called the table not specified. We have which table are you mapping to, and we also return selection string for current internal state, whereby you get selection. We have the selection argument for current internal state. You have the map columns. We have convert to string, so you can easily use all these all these methods right there in your menu provider or in any provider you create. Now we execute a query using the current internal state. That's the where clause. If you should notice the DB, the columns, the call, this is the null for the selection, its argument, and the order by, just like what we've talked about. This is also we execute a query using the current internal state as the where clause, just like what we've done up there. This is the update. There's the delete. We're deleting. This is just like a selection builder. This is out of the box, so you can easily use them. Don't really need to put all this right there in your memory or now. Just get hands on it and create your selection builder. You may not necessarily use all of them. You may not even access one of them. But if you have to, you have them right there sitting in your code. So that's cool. Back to the menu provider. Now we call on the selection builder, whereby we have the URL match, which is the argument. Now is the switch statement argument. That's which URL are you matching, based on the two different types of URL we have for the first, for the all entries, and for the one with ID. You understand? Now for the one where with ID, which is the root entries ID, that's this is going to return a single entry by its ID. If you should notice, yeah, there's a question mark, which ID, and this is just the recommended way to access the database, with an ID. This is very cool because if it actually helps you out, it blocks out SQL injection. When someone is trying to inject a malicious code into your SQL statement, this is actually going to read it or block it out. So this is the recommended way from the Google documentation on how to actually create your selection and selection argument based on its ID, based on the input you are expecting. You're expecting an input from probably a user or from somewhere, So you're actually going to create the structure this way. And for the entries, probably you are going to return all known entries. This is the way you go about it. This is where you run the selection. You call the builder, you create the DB, the projection, and sort order, which you would have probably declared from the parameters over here. Cool. Let's look at other methods. We have the get type. We only have two types here: the root entries and the root entries ID. That's the one with an ID and the one with all when we are calling all data. We have the insert. You want to insert to the DB now. So you just call on all these methods probably when you're accessing the content provider. You call on them and you actually have them sorted out. You have them delivered to you. You don't really need to go through too much hassle. Since you've declared your provider, you've substantiated, you've been able to have a delete method, you've been able to have an update method, you'll be able to have an insert method. This will just help you easily to access those data, without even going through too much hassle anymore. Now the insert, you always have two, the root entries and the root entries by ID. And let's look at the query. This is actually going to take on the table name, the pass null as the parameter. That's for the ID now. And also the content values. You are trying to get the ID, which you pass into here, and now you pass the result based on the content URI which you've had and the ID. This is actually going to return insert a particular data into your database. Now we look at the delete. This is the delete method when you're trying to delete from the database. We have two other entries too. The first is the root entries, and the one is ID. Probably you are trying to delete a specific, row with an ID. We always have things like that. You probably just want to delete one row with an ID of 12. So you easily run through this. If you notice the ID, it's a parameter here, whereby you get to the URI get last path segment, and the builder table builds that up, and now you have the ID as a parameter to pass in which ID are you deleting before this delete function is going to actually trigger on that particular line that you're trying to take off from the database. And we have the update. You can decide to update a particular row, based on the selection. Probably you have a row of 10 and you want to update the name to change from John to Smith. It's just how you go about it. And if you actually want to do this, you pass in the case, the root entries ID, and now you also have this ID as a parameter. And now you're going to have a where statement, the selection and the argument where, which row, which column are you trying to modify, and what is your argument? What are you passing in, to actually replace what was there? So that's what that selection argument is all about. Once you have this structured correctly, you have a robust provider that is ready to access your DB anytime, anywhere, and that is going to actually return the right input and is going to make the right changes without breaking down any system whatsoever. So it's always very good to create your content provider in a robust format, whereby you will be able to update, delete, and such. You might not be using all in your application based on what kind of application or what you are about delivering. But it's always good to also to always declare them so that they'll be there, and then so you use them call them, not that you're going to go through the pain of creating or debugging your content provider any longer. So that's cool. This is just how to create your content provider. You have it settled, you have it structured. And before you continue, before you be so sure that you have a content provider running right there on your code, you need to visit the Android manifest, and you need to register your provider right there in the metadata of your application. So in here, can you see we register our provider, and we create the name. The name is going to point to the name of the provider called menu provider, and the authority, very important. You need an authority called the common example Delaware JSON to XML. You can easily look at that right there in the DB contract, and you can easily create a string for the authority right there in the string XML. So you just point it at that, and you have the exported. Are you going to export your data to other application? That's the essence of that. True. If you put just like a contact application and some other application right there that actually exported the content provider, you can access data from the content provider. So this is just it, because we've created our own content provider, and we can decide to export it to other applications for you so that they can pick it up, they can access some data, they can access some menu items, from their own application. You can see the beauty of the content provider. So if you decide to add false here, definitely you are not exporting data to other application. So no application will be able to use your content provider. So that's just what that is. So with that, we're ready. You're ready to go. You have a full working content provider. In our next tutorial, which will actually extend from this, we'll be able to access data from the content provider using the cursor loader, and let's populate the UI. So that will be so sure that, oh wow, this works. The content loader could read data from the content provider and could give access to the adapter to actually display this on UI. And afterwards, we still need to play around with some other aspect that content provider could provide. Content provider could provide to widgets. So we still have to create widgets to be able to see, wow, so content provider could actually get data, for our widgets, and our widget is right there flying. Cool. So this is just the things that will still be going around here and there doing with content provider. You can also use it with the abstract threaded sync adapter. Probably you have written JSON file, JSON data from the from online or from a cloud. You need a sync adapter to periodically, synchronize what you have right there on the cloud with what you have right there in the data storage or in the SQLite database. So the sync adapter comes in to actually helps out in that, and you also need a content provider to create access to make the intermingling aspects right there going on. So that's cool. These are the all things we'll still be getting our server clientized with in Android development. This is an advanced aspect of Android development. If you are a beginner, go through my beginner series. You'll be able to still come back here to actually get your hands ready. And if you have been right there around with Android development, this is your best opportunity to up your game and to move to the advanced aspect of Android development. Because once you have all these parts, all these snippets working in your application, I'm telling you, your app is just reaching up to the sky. So I will be stopping right there, and I'll be joining you in the next tutorial. Please leave a comment below if you really enjoy one or two things and you really want me to even do one more thing more, or any way that I can improve more, and be there to give you everything you really want. Leave down the comments, and I'll be right there to reply to all your queries. And don't forget to please strike that button. Please subscribe to my channel. This is just a form of encouraging me to always bring the best for you. Thank you very much for hanging out with me throughout this tutorial. Don't go anywhere. In our next part, we're talking about cursor loader and how to actually populate our UI with magnificent data from the content provider. Thank you guys.